Have you ever stood in front of someone and said nothing and yet felt like you said everything? Let me take you to a moment. A woman, let's call her Sarah, is sitting in a small cafe. She checks her phone. Again, nothing. She fixes her hair, stares at the door, sips her coffee slowly as if she's buying time. The chair across from her is empty. The man she once trusted to show up, to speak, to be there isn't coming. But it's not the missed date that stings the most. It's the silence. That deafening, unexplainable absence where words should have lived, where apologies should have come, where presence should have healed. And this is the truth people don't talk about. Sometimes your absence will haunt her louder than your presence ever did. Because absence isn't passive, it's a message, a choice, a ghost that stays. And I want to speak to that today, not just for the woman waiting at the table, but for the one holding back her own voice and for the one afraid to show up. This is a story about you, about her, about all of us. It's about power, about growth, about reclaiming presence in a world that's gone silent when it should have shown up. Let's walk through this together. The echo of what wasn't said, silence has weight. Not the kind you can lift or measure in pounds, but the kind that settles in your chest and grows heavier with time. And the heaviest silence of all is the one that takes the place of something that should have been there. A word, a truth, a simple goodbye. We live in a world that often tells us to hold back. Don't stir the pot, just let it go. And somewhere along the way, this message sinks into our bones. So instead of speaking up, we go quiet, we disappear. We assume silence will smooth things over, that it will protect both parties from pain. But what we don't realize is that silence is not neutral, it's a message. It speaks, whether we want it to or not. When someone you care about disappears without explanation, you don't just feel abandoned, you feel erased. You're left standing in the middle of a story with no ending, and all you have to work with are broken pieces. That silence, the absence of words, forces her to create meaning out of nothing. And that's where the true damage begins, because the stories we create in the absence of truth, they're often cruel. They rarely reflect what really happened. Instead, they echo the deepest insecurities we hold inside ourselves. She begins to wonder, was I too much? Was I not enough? Did I deserve this? When someone walks away without explanation, without the courage to say, I'm leaving and this is why, it leaves a gaping wound. A one that she keeps trying to stitch closed with assumptions. Self-blame and silent tears. Over time, that one doesn't heal its scars. It changes the way she sees herself. It changes how she shows up in future relationships. And worst of all, it can convince her that she's unworthy of closure, unworthy of answers, unworthy of honesty. We have this idea that words complicate things, that if we say too much, it'll only make the pain worse. But truth doesn't destroy people, the absence of truth does. Avoidance might feel easier in the short term, but it leaves a trail of brokenness that lingers long after we're gone. We think we're protecting others by staying silent, but really we're protecting ourselves from discomfort. And that's not noble, that's fear. And fear, when left unchecked, becomes cruelty. Imagine how different things could be if we found the courage to speak even when it's uncomfortable. Imagine saying, I'm sorry, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm doing right now, but I care about you. Or even, I need to walk away, but I want you to know this isn't about your worth. It's about where I am in my life. Those words might not make things painless, but they make things honest. They leave less room for doubt, less room for her to destroy herself with the story she's forced to create in your absence. We don't need to have perfect answers. We don't even need to be certain. But what we owe one another, what we owe ourselves, is presence. Presence means showing up with your truth, not disappearing into silence. Because when you leave without saying a word, you don't just walk out of her life. You leave her stuck in an endless loop of what ifs, and that loop can echo for years. Let me be clear, your silence doesn't just end a chapter. It rewrites the entire story, and not with facts, but with fear. It takes strength to speak. But it takes even more strength to stay when things feel messy, to show up with your uncertainty, and to give someone the decency of understanding, to say, I may not know what comes next, but I won't disappear. I won't leave you to wonder. Because if you walk away in silence, your absence will scream. It will become a ghost in her life, showing up in new relationships, in sleepless nights, in the mirror she stares into, wondering what made her so easy to leave. Speak, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because your words can be the thing that sets her free, or the silence that keeps her shackled to a story that was never hers to carry. And that's not just about her. That's about you too, about the kind of person you choose to be. Will you be the one who had the courage to tell the truth, even when your voice trembled? Or the one who disappeared and left someone else to piece together the fragments? Silence isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's the cruelest thing you can offer. Say the thing, even if it hurts, even if it's not perfect, because that echo of what you didn't say will ring louder and linger longer than anything you ever could have spoken. The power of presence over perfection. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be there. But somewhere along the way, we started believing a different story. We started thinking that unless we had the right words, the perfect timing, or all the emotional tools sharpened and ready, we shouldn't show up at all. We convinced ourselves that love, support, and connection had to look polished, curated, and wise. So instead of being present, we hesitated, we held back, we disappeared. And what we didn't realize in those moments was that the person on the other side didn't need perfection. They needed presence. They needed someone who was willing to sit with them, not fix them, not teach them, not rescue them, just sit. Just be. Just exist in that space, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was messy. We underestimate the power of that kind of presence. We think we have to be strong to show up, but showing up is what makes us strong. It's the quiet kind of courage, the kind that doesn't get applause, the kind that no one may even notice at first. But for the person who's hurting, your presence becomes a lifeline, a whisper that says, you are not alone. I remember Maria. She had just lost her father, and she was shattered in ways words can't touch. Her friends, well-meaning but unsure, backed away. They said things like, I didn't want to intrude, or I figured you needed space. And maybe they did it because they didn't know what to say. Maybe they were afraid they'd make things worse. But weeks later, Maria told me, with tears in her eyes, I didn't need anyone to fix me. I just needed someone to hold my hand and say nothing. That stayed with me. Because we've been conditioned to believe that doing nothing is failure, that unless we're offering a solution, we're useless. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Just being there, just sitting in the mess with someone, is one of the most powerful human things you can do. It says, I see your pain, I won't run from it, I won't run from you. Presence is a form of love, one of the deepest ones. And it doesn't come with ribbons or scripts or grand gestures. It's found in the quiet, everyday acts of choosing someone, showing up when it's inconvenient, calling even when you're not sure what to say, holding space for someone else's hurt without needing to fix your own discomfort. Think about the people who've impacted your life the most. Chances are, they weren't perfect. They didn't always have the right words, but they showed up. They were there, in the darkness, in the silence, in the uncertainty, and their presence made the difference, not because it erased the pain, but because it made it bearable. We spend so much time chasing perfection, afraid to say the wrong thing, afraid to show up with our own brokenness. But the truth is, your imperfections are what make you real. They're what make your love believable. Because no one needs a flawless hero, they need a faithful human. Someone who says, I don't have it all figured out, but I won't leave you. And this matters not just in romantic relationships, but in every kind of relationship, friendships, family, community. When you ghost someone because you feel inadequate, when you disappear because you're afraid of doing it wrong, you don't protect them. You leave them wondering why they weren't worth the risk of you just showing up. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to have the answers. All you have to do is say, I'm here. And that on its own is everything. That is enough. Because in the end, people don't remember the perfect words you spoke. They remember the moments you stood by them, even in silence. They remember who came when it was hard, who stayed when it got messy, who leaned in even when it was uncomfortable. So don't wait to become perfect. Don't wait until you figured out what to say or how to say it. Don't wait until your heart feels whole or your confidence is fully restored. Just show up, because presence doesn't haunt, presence heals. When courage means staying, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Not fight, not fix, not shout over the chaos or run away from the discomfort. Just stay quietly, steadily, present. A world that worships independence, that glorifies cutting ties and doing you. The moment something feels hard, we've forgotten something essential. Relationships are not supposed to be easy. They're not built on perfect compatibility or uninterrupted joy. They are built on resilience, on choosing each other not just when it's light and simple, but when everything feels heavy and confusing. Staying takes courage. It takes heart. It takes looking at someone in their pain, their anger, their mess, and saying, I still choose you. Let me tell you about Aisha. She's someone I met years ago. Strong on the outside, but quietly breaking on the inside. Her childhood was littered with empty spaces. Her father left when she was 8, and from then on, people just kept leaving. Her first love walked away without saying goodbye. Her closest friends distanced themselves the moment she stopped pretending everything was fine. Over time, she learned to protect herself the only way she knew how, by not needing anyone, by building walls instead of bridges. Because if people were going to leave anyway, why let them close enough to hurt you? She called it strength, but really it was survival. Then one day, someone stayed, a partner. Not perfect, not polished, but deeply grounded in something rare. Emotional presence. He didn't run when Aisha got triggered. He didn't try to fix her or change her. When she pulled away, he leaned in, gently, quietly, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. And when she finally asked, half expecting him to leave like the rest, he looked at her and said, I'm not leaving when it's hard. That's when it matters most. That moment didn't erase her trauma, but it started something. It planted a new seed, the belief that maybe, just maybe, someone could love her and stay. Staying doesn't mean losing yourself. It doesn't mean allowing disrespect or erasing your own needs. It's not about enabling pain or enduring abuse. It means honoring your integrity. It means having the courage to be present in someone's storm, not to control the weather, but to sit beside them until it passes. Most people know how to be there for the celebration, the good days, the wins. But true connection is forged in the fire, when things are uncertain, when feelings are messy, when the easiest thing to do would be to walk away. Because let's be honest, staying is not convenient. It forces you to confront parts of yourself that you'd rather ignore. It brings up your own fears, your own discomfort, your own instinct to retreat. But that's the point. Growth lives in that space. In the tension, in the decision to stay and stretch instead of shrink and run. So many of us carry the silent wind of abandonment. Not always the big dramatic kind, but the quieter kind. People who emotionally checked out, who showed up only when it benefited them. Who left us in our darkest hour because they didn't know how to handle our pain. And that leaves scars, invisible ones that whisper, you're too much, you're not worth the effort. Love will always leave. But staying, especially when it's hard, rewrites that story. It tells someone, you are worth discomfort, you are worth effort, you are worth growing through this. It says, this moment does not define you, and it doesn't scare me enough to leave. There is nothing passive about that. That's not weakness. That's not martyrdom. That is strength. That is emotional bravery. So many relationships fall apart not because people stop loving each other, but because they stop staying. They stop doing the uncomfortable work. They choose distance over vulnerability. And in doing so, they miss the opportunity for something deeper, something forged not through ease, but through enduring. The truth is, most people don't need you to fix their problems. They just need to know you won't vanish when things get real. They need to know that hard doesn't mean gone. That struggle doesn't equal rejection. That they can mess up, fall apart, and still be worthy of someone choosing to stay. It's not always about big actions. Sometimes, the most life-changing gift you can give another person is this: I'm still here. Even now, especially now, when it's complicated, when you feel unlovable, I'm here. Not forever, not unconditionally without boundaries, but for as long as it's right, I will show up. Because real love doesn't only whisper sweet things in the light. Sometimes real love stays in the dark. How absence breaks trust, And presence builds it. Trust isn't something you can buy, demand, or fabricate. It's not built in grand gestures, perfect timing, or perfectly chosen words. Trust is slow, quiet, cumulative. It's born in the smallest, often overlooked moments, when you choose presence over disappearance, truth over silence, showing up over pulling away. It's not the promise that you'll never make a mistake. It's the proof over and over again that when things get difficult, you won't run. And the quickest way to shatter that fragile foundation, to vanish when you're needed the most. Absence in the middle of conflict doesn't just sting, it destabilizes. It sends a message loud and clear, whether you meant it or not. You can't count on me. And here's the part we often forget. She hears that message not just in her mind, but in her body. It becomes wired into her nervous system. That deep primal place where memory isn't stored as words or ideas, but as sensations, tightness in the chest, heaviness in the stomach, the sudden ache of being left alone in a moment of emotional need. People think trust is broken by betrayal. And yes, sometimes it is, but more often, it's broken by absence, by the kind of neglect that isn't physical but emotional. When you say, I need a break, but never explain what that means. When she reaches for you during an argument and you turn away. When you leave a conversation unfinished and never return to it. Those are the moments that undo safety. Those are the fractures that widen into cracks and eventually into distance so vast that love alone can't reach across it anymore. Presence, however, real, grounded, consistent presence, is an antidote. Not just to conflict, but to trauma. It says, I see you, I won't abandon you in this. And it doesn't require you to have the right words or the perfect answers. It only asks that you stay. You rebuild trust not by pretending you've never made a mistake, but by returning. By circling back and saying, I handled that poorly. I want to understand. I want to do better. That's what presence looks like. It's accountability. It's care. It's saying, you matter more than my pride. There's something incredibly healing about someone choosing to stay when things are messy. When they look at you, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worth fighting for. That kind of presence, it does something to a soul. It teaches someone that pain doesn't equal punishment, that struggle doesn't equal abandonment. It allows her to breathe deeper in future conversations, because now she knows she's not alone in it. So many of us were taught the opposite. We were raised in environments where conflict meant doors slamming, silence meant love being withheld like a weapon. We internalized the belief that anger drives people away, that vulnerability is dangerous, that when you mess as adults, when conflict arises, we run, or we shut down, or we disappear, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But here's the truth: growth lives inside discomfort. Conflict is not the enemy. The absence of repair is. Trust grows every time you stay when it would have been easier to leave. Every time you say, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not going anywhere. Every time you sit through a difficult conversation and resist the urge to withdraw. Every time you lean in when she's spiraling. When you say, I hear you, instead of get over it. That is what builds safety. That is what teaches her and teaches you that love can be safe even in hard moments. Because presence doesn't just teach her to trust you, it teaches her to trust herself again. When someone consistently shows up, it tells her, you weren't too much, you weren't wrong to speak up, you weren't crazy to feel hurt. It affirms that her feelings are valid, her needs are legitimate, and that she doesn't have to beg for consistency. Presence creates a container where two people can grow together. It becomes the space where healing happens not because the pain is avoided, but because it's witnessed, because it's met with compassion instead of retreat. It takes courage to be that kind of presence, especially when you're angry, especially when you're tired, especially when your instincts tell you to shut down. But trust me, those are the moments that matter most. That's when your presence stops being just a comfort and becomes a foundation. That's when she starts to believe that this time maybe she won't be left. Maybe this time someone will stay. And once she starts believing that, everything changes. The legacy of what you leave behind, at the end of the day, we all leave something behind. Whether we mean to or not, whether we're ready or not, there's always a mark, a fingerprint, a trail of choices that whisper long after we've walked away. And the only real question is this: what kind of legacy will you leave? Will you be remembered for what you built, or for what you abandoned? For the way you spoke love, or for the silence that took its place? Will your absence be remembered more vividly than your presence ever was? We don't like thinking of ourselves as people who leave pain in our wake. Most of us don't intend to. We think that if we don't say the hard things, if we just disappear quietly, maybe we won't hurt them more. But that's not how it works. Absence doesn't dissolve into nothing, it echoes. It reverberates, it fills the spaces where words should have been. And it doesn't fade with time. If anything, it sharpens. Years from now, she may not remember the specific arguments. She may not remember what you wore on that last date or which exact words were said. But she will remember how it ended. She'll remember that she waited for a call that never came. That she stared at her phone hoping to understand. That she was left to pick up the pieces of something that was never fully explained. And that kind of ending, it stays with you. It becomes a chapter that never really closes. A wound that scabs over but never fully heals. And the truth is that legacy isn't just hers, it's yours. Because how you show up in your relationships is a reflection of how you show up in life. If you run when things get hard with her, chances are you'll run when life gets hard for you. If you ghost her in the middle of conflict, you'll ghost your own growth. You'll avoid discomfort not just with people but with yourself. That unfinished conversation with her, it becomes an unfinished lesson, one that will repeat itself in every room you walk into, in every connection you try to build again. We tell ourselves stories like, she's better off without me, or I didn't know what to say. But what if the point wasn't to have the perfect thing to say? What if the point was to simply show up flawed and scared and real and say something, anything? That said, You mattered. The legacy you leave isn't about being flawless, it's about being present. It's about having the courage to face what's uncomfortable instead of hiding behind it. That's what people remember, not your polished excuses, but your raw humanity. Now that you had it all figured out, but whether you stayed when it counted. Whether you had the backbone to say, this is hard, but I care enough to stand in it with you. We live in a culture obsessed with image, with keeping things clean, with curating the highlight reel, but real life, it's messy. And the people who impact us most deeply aren't the ones who walk away when it gets chaotic. They're the ones who stay, who speak, who finish things, who don't leave us wondering. It takes so much more strength to stay when you're afraid than it does to run when you're uncomfortable. And that's where your legacy lives, not in what you own, not in who you impressed, but in the imprint you left on someone's soul. Did you leave them more broken or more whole? Being remembered isn't the goal, being felt is. Leaving someone better than you found them, owning your part in their story, and even if it ends, even if you outgrow each other, even if love shifts into distance, you can still leave with grace. You can still close the chapter in a way that honors what it was. You may think she's forgotten, you may assume she's moved on, but absence leaves questions. And some of those questions grow into fears she'll carry into the next relationship, the next chance at love. She'll wonder if she's hard to love, if people always leave when she needs them most. And that isn't just on her to unlearn. It's on you not to confirm. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be intense, show up, especially at the end, especially when it hurts, especially when you'd rather disappear. Because that's your legacy. The sum of your choices, the shadow your presence or your absence casts. And you get to decide right now, what do I want to be remembered for? In the end, this isn't just about her, it's about you. It's about whether you will keep leaving rooms empty, or whether you will finally decide to fill them with your courage, your truth, your presence. She doesn't need a flawless you, she needs a faithful you, one that speaks, one that stays, one that dares to show up when silence is easier. Because that absence, it's not just haunting her, it's haunting you. But here's the gift, you get to change that story today. You can walk out of this room, out of this silence, and into your life with a new promise to never be the ghost in someone's story again, to show up, to speak up, to stay. And when you do that, when you reclaim your voice and your presence, you'll not only heal her, you'll finally start healing yourself.